presentation. Appreciated your time. I do want to ask a question about something that I'm not sure you want to answer, but product identifiers. So when we have our labeling, we do not have the designator G10 lot EXP, and the 2D matrix is printed online. So what we're sending in, like PDFs, do not contain that information. How do we demonstrate that we are indeed compliant with the DSCA, and also do we have to include it in our SPL, in our principal display panel, representative samples in SPL? Do they have to indicate compliance as well? Sorry.
Am I on?
Sorry.
So from my division, the medication error prevention and analysis, in terms of how do you indicate to us that you are already compliant with the DSCSA, say when the container and carton label you submitted, the PDF does not have it on there, when we get it, we may send you a recommendation that refers you to the guidance, or maybe we send you an information request. As long as you reply telling us we actually already have this, it's just here, just go see this website, then that works for us. As far as the SPL, I don't know the answer to your question, but Eric, if you want to comment, feel free. Otherwise, you can send that question to that email address he just showed, and then he'll triage it to the right person.
I'm also not a product identifying expert in any way, shape, or form. So.
All right, thanks.
Okay. But they will have answers to other questions, so come on up to the microphones. Do we have an online question? Oh, wait, we actually had somebody come right up to the microphone. No, there we go. We'll go to online next, please. Nice and close.
Hi, thank you for the great presentations. This is a question about barcoding, specifically on container labels. Does the barcoding requirement hold true for diagnostic radiopharmaceuticals?
Well, okay. We can check that CFR to be sure, but as far as I recall, the radiopharmaceuticals are exempt from the barcode, the linear barcode.
Yes.
As far as that DSCSA, the 2D matrix, you have to check that. That I'm not 100% positive.
I was looking at some of the images of labels for the RLDs that we are interested in, and the labels do not have a barcode.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
The label images that are on drugs at FDA or some of the other related sites, which give the images for the labels, plus the prescribing information. The labels on the containers, there is no barcode on those. So I was wondering whether the barcode is missing because it's just an image, or are there different requirements for diagnostic radiopharmaceuticals with respect to barcoding?
For the linear barcodes, the radiopharmaceuticals are exempt.
Okay. It would be for diagnostic as well as therapeutic? Both?
That would be my understanding, but maybe that's more of an interpretation of the CFR, but that would be my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
All right, let's take our first online question, please.
Thank you, Jeff. Are NDC numbers required on carton labels and or container labels?
So as far as the CFR goes, the NDC numbers are not required. But as we all know, in real practice, these NDC numbers are often used as like your second identifier to make sure we have the right product, the right strength. So from the medication error perspective, we highly encourage you to present the NDC code on your product's container label and carton labeling.
All right, microphone number one, nice and close for me, please.
You recommended using a year, month, and day format for the expiration date. Is it possible also to just use the month and the last day of the month is implied? Usually there's not a specific to the day expiration date.
We are open to alternative where the date is dropped, and then I I do know somewhere we do define whether then it's understood to be the first of the month or last of the month, but I can't really recall right now, but I have seen that.
Okay,
in
thank
products.
you.
Something to add?
So I can help. So for expiration dates in Chapter 7, USP talks about expiration dates, and that's going to be updated. I believe it was actually published in PF updates in a pharmaceutical form in USP, but there's updates to proposals for a standardized expiration date format. That being said, answering your question, it's been a long standard that for expiration dates, if you include the year and a month only as an expiration date, it's understood that it's the last day of that said month.
Thank you, Jabril.
All right. Ray, have you got another one for me?
Yes, this was directed to Dr. Brodsky. How often do you recommend we review carton labeling and prescribing information for consistent information?
Good question. So I would say if you're any time that you're updating product quality information in the prescribing information, that there's lots of product quality elements on carton container labeling. So every time you're doing that, you should review, I recommend you review carton container labeling. With respect to clinically related items, there are precautionary statements and warning statements on carton container labeling, so you have to see if that's within that scope. If you have a 30-page document prescribing information and you're talking about you're updating hepatotoxicity, but that does not appear in the carton, it doesn't appear in the carton container labeling, you don't have to think about the carton container labeling. However, if you have a precautionary statement about drug interactions or other items that you're updating on the prescribing information, at that time, the same time you're updating the prescribing information, I recommend you look at the carton container labeling. It's always a good idea to do a double check when you're in doubt. It won't take that much time to just look at the information on the carton labeling and container labeling and the prescribing information. I'll tell you, after we did, a pilot look at some of the inappropriate inconsistencies, now when I review labeling, I used to only review the prescribing information. Now I look at the carton container labeling to see if there are potential inappropriate inconsistencies, just as a matter of habit.
Okay, microphone number 2. Nice and close, please.
Hi, I was wondering, for small labels, I know you mentioned, the minimum small label exemption that you need the product, lot number, and the manufacturer name. If you can fit additional information on there, at a minimum, what else would you suggest, such as NDC number or barcode? And what about the expiration date? I think that those are important things to have on the syringe label for purposes of tracking medication errors and ensuring that the right dose is being given.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you, and the expiration date needs to be on there. And then maybe on my slide, it was kind of towards the bottom. So although not a part of the CFR, the USP does require the expiration date to also be on the small labels. And then for the name, established name, lot number, manufacturer, product stream that you mentioned, that's in the CFR. But for the draft guidance, we also highly recommend the route of administration, and then any warning or cautionary statements be included. The NDC, again, highly recommend it be there because it's used as a second identifier. The linear barcode is required per a separate CFR, so that will also need to be there.
Yeah, so if we could exclude perhaps the NDC number from the syringe label because it appears on the carton, would that be acceptable due to limited space, since technically it's not required, but if you do have it, it typically appears on the top third of the PDP?
So maybe if you have a special situation, since the NDC is not required by the CFR, I think you would be fine to exclude it. But I do want to clarify, there used to be a top third of the PDP in the CFR. I think that's gone now. That has been updated. But yeah, if you're really working with that limited space and you can't fit the NDC per the CFR, it's not required to be presented. But the barcode is there, and the barcode kind of contains the NDC number, just a reminder.
Because that's what the pharmacist, well, if it's in a box, they usually would scan the carton if they wouldn't be scanning the syringes unless they were dispensed individually.
Then maybe that's your rationale to us when you're telling us you really can't fit it on the immediate container label. But I will still present the NDC on the carton labeling.
Thank you.
All right, next online question, please, Ray.
This is directed to Alice. Does FDA make any recommendations on the number of colors on a package label / brand logo beyond differentiating for strength?
The number of colors, as many as you like, as long as it's not prone to medication errors. Let me see, but like some considerations on colors. We talked about differentiating the strengths. And the thing that we sometimes will see is that, say your graphic designer will design the product name in some fancy, I don't know, red color. And then your product has 3 different strengths. And then the strength would be differentiated by red, orange, and yellow. Well, that red, because it's in your product name, it kind of carries over to the other 2 strengths, and that makes all 3 of the different strengths look somewhat similar because they all have that red color that's in your product name. Therefore, we would typically recommend that if a color is already used in your product name, to not use that as one of the colors that you're picking to use to differentiate the strengths. But otherwise, is there a limited number? You can use all 7 colors of the rainbow if you want. I don't know.
All right, we got time for one more question, please, Ray.
All right, we just got one that came in. This is towards Dr. Brodsky. Why do you think there have been inconsistencies between the prescribing information and carton labeling?
That's a good question. I could only guess or hypothesize. I know in CDER, the FDA, we have different folks that work on the prescribing information and carton container labeling. Carton container labeling, primarily folks from medication errors and product quality, although those folks do look at prescribing information. So possibly there are different groups that work concentrate on these different labeling types. Possibly it's the same in industry. Possibly some potentially clinicians may not be looking at carton container labeling, although I don't know, in different groups, and potentially if you do not have clinicians or certain SMEs, they may not know that there is an inconsistency. So therefore, I would recommend clinicians looking at carton container labeling, the relevant parts of carton container labeling, and the relevant parts of prescribing information.
Okay, that is all the time we have for questions, but as we've come to the end of the conference, in addition to Captain Brenda Stoddart, the driving force behind the conference was Eric Brodsky. So we'd like to turn it over to Eric for a minute or two to share some closing thoughts.
First of all, I would like to give a round of applause to Jeff and his staff for putting on a fantastic conference. As well as Brenda and her staff, Renee and Ray. We really appreciate your help over these last several months and putting on a fantastic and working with us and putting on a fantastic conference. Next, I would like to thank all the speakers throughout CDER for all your dedication, your hard work, putting together your slides. and providing great information in this public forum. So thank you. And lastly, I would like to thank the audience members, the folks who attended in person and those online. We appreciate your interest in prescription drug labeling. Your questions help us figure out what additional needs, potentially in guidance development, in terms of policy development, changing existing guidances, providing additional tools. Please reach out to us. I listed the website before. Again, non-product specific question, non-application specific questions. And if you have ideas about improving our website or ideas about certain guidance development, if there are different areas of labeling, we welcome your thoughts, your feedback, your suggestions. And thank you for attending.